Hey everybody, welcome back to part 2 of our zapping seminar, and you may be wondering, whoa, another video, how long is this going to take? But keep in mind that the ACT is a long test. It takes more than 4 hours to get through, and we still have a lot of really good information. We'll be talking about math, science, and reading in this portion of the seminar, and also if it gets too long and drawn out, you can always just hit the stop button and come back a little bit later. Okay, but stick with me because I have some really good information. So quick review from last time. If you do know the answer, go ahead and answer the question, but don't leave anything blank on the ACT. If you're not sure about the answer, then go ahead and go through that zapping process. Remember that there's probably going to be at least one answer choice that's clearly incorrect. So cross that one out of the way first so you don't have to keep thinking about it. And then you can start to narrow it down. If you can't zap, go ahead and just guess and keep working your way through the test, because the next question might be an easier question to answer. It might be one that you already know. Okay, and then also, when you are doing the timing, go ahead and maybe write down a stop time, or if you're on a computer, keep very close track of that, because in the last 5 minutes of the test, you need to look at check your progress and go ahead and start filling in some bubbles. If you have a lot left over, go ahead and just start doing the blind guessing if that's what you've got to do. You want to make sure that you are done by the end of the test time, that you don't have any blanks left. And sometimes if you have not practiced with a computer, what I've heard from feedback from other students is that there seems to be like just a little bit of lag time there between, and it's only seconds, but it feels like it could be longer, and it could end up taking a little bit because you have to push your submit for every answer, and that takes a little bit of time. So do watch your time. Watching your time with this test is key. It's one of the most important strategies because you don't want to leave anything blank. That's our great key. And zap where you can, guess if you have to, but look at those questions carefully, and that'll help you do your very, very best. All right, so we are going to tie right into math on our very next slide. Okay, with the math test, you have 60 minutes and you have 60 questions, and you can see on the screen there the number of questions in each category, and you can see that most of these questions are going to be on algebra. Pre-algebra, elementary algebra, intermediate algebra, and most of you have already taken algebra pretty recently, or you might be taking your algebra class right now. There are only 4 problems on trigonometry. And I want to remind you again that the ACT test is not scored like a regular test you would take in the classroom. So guess how many questions you actually would need to get correct to get national average on the math section. I have really good news. If math isn't your strong point, you would really only need to get 30. That's right. If you get half of the questions correct, that will put you in the national average. So anything over half is going to bump you up just a little. So that's a very important thing to keep in mind, especially when you are zapping and maybe even doing some guessing. You don't want to spend time working every single one of these problems. If you don't know the answer, zap or guess and move on. Okay, this strategy for our math test is going to help you work your way through this test and see all of the problems so that you are not just going through one at a time and trying to decide if you know how to do these or not. So our strategy works just a little bit differently there. And do remember that you already know most of this. You've already seen most of the things that are on the test. And a little bit of brush up is always good. You don't need a calculator for this test. A lot of students do use a calculator. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but it's designed to be able to work through without a calculator if you don't have one. And also, you can look at page 84 of your study guide, and you can look at how many questions you would need to get correct in order to get the score on math that you're aiming for. So that's another place to check when you get finished watching our video. Okay, we're going to get started. All right, so we are going to show you how to take control away from the ACT and put yourself in control of the test. Sounds better, right? So we want you to consider that every difficult problem is what we're going to call a control point. Now keep in mind, math is different for everybody. So control points aren't the same for each student. Maybe you are someone who is a real whiz at math, and congratulations on that. But if math isn't really your thing, then this strategy will help you work your way through that and still take control of the test. Remember that this test is different, so you have to change from your usual strategies. Our practice at school is that you just work your way through. You power through every problem because you're trying to get them correct. In this case, you really don't have to get every problem correct. You can still miss half, which would be a disaster on a regular math test, but you can miss half on this test and you still do okay. So you want to skip those control points. That's right. When you get to a difficult problem in this strategy, the first thing you're going to do is skip over them. That's going to take some practice because that's not what we're used to doing. We're used to working on them. So we want to skip them. So this particular strategy is a 3-pass strategy. We'll show you how to use 3 passes to take control over the ACT so that you can do your very best on the math test. For the 3-pass strategy, the first pass is to look at every problem from beginning to end and skip over those control points. Remember the ones that look kind of tough. Okay, skip them and move on to the very next one. Don't let anything slow you down. That first pass is a pretty quick one, and so you want to work carefully, but don't slow down. If the problem looks like something you've got to stop and work on, pass it over and answer the very next one that you know the answer to just right away. On your second pass, you're going to go back to the beginning of the test and you're going to work those harder problems that you haven't answered, but you probably do know how to work them. And so go ahead and do the math there and work your way through those hardest problems. But again, skip the ones that are the hardest. If they are difficult, they're giving you a hard time, skip over them. In the second pass, this is the place to check your work. Because in the second pass, you do the work on the math problems that you have to work out a little bit, but you know how to do it. So you'll have time to go back and check your work. And then the third pass over, so this of our 3-pass strategy is to go back again to the very beginning of the test. And if you have time, work on those really tough problems. Go ahead and zap where you can and try your very best. But remember, if you just don't get it, blind guess. Don't leave anything blank. The only way that you have no chance of getting a correct answer is if you leave a blank. So guess if you have to and zap where you can. So there are some tips to practice as we use our 3-pass strategy, and it's going to take some practice because we realize that this is a radical strategy. We're not used to skipping over the hard ones. But in this case, watch out for things that are very predictable. So the test writers throw in some errors that are really easy to spot. So what if your problem is 8 times 2? Okay, we know the answer to that one. It's D, right? It's 16. But what are some predictable errors? What if you didn't quite know how to do multiplication? And what if you maybe mistook this for 8 plus 2 or 8 minus 2? In that case, some predictable errors would be 10 or 6 and maybe even 4 because what's 8 divided by 2? So look out for those. Probably the easiest answer to zap right away would be E. Right? 8 times 2, 8 plus 2, 8 divided by 2. None of those are going to come up to 82. So that would be the one you could really zap, and then you could start working from there. But ACT knows that some students aren't going to know how to do this, so they throw in some very predictable errors. For the most part with math, you want to keep moving. You want to remember that 3-pass method, and we'll practice it today, but when you're practicing on your own, go ahead and do the 3 passes. And then you should have some scrap paper. So even if you're taking the test online, they'll give you some paper to work your problems. If you have a test booklet, write all over it, not a problem. Underline the question part, we'll talk about that. Draw a picture if you need to, and do your math work. And also you want to check your work on every problem when there's time, but use that 3-pass method. So when you're going through on that 2nd and 3rd pass, that's where you're going to do your work. And watch out for predictable errors. In your practice, get familiar with those common formulas, kind of the ones that everybody should know from algebra. The information on common formulas isn't provided because we expect that you're going to know that. So a good place to find this is page 52 of your study guide, and that gives you a nice review of some math skills. And then watch your answers very carefully too, and make sure that you match up the numbers if you skip problems. So this is important. You can mark them when you are doing your test online, or if you're using a paper pencil, then you can mark those. Keep track of the problems that you've skipped over, because a main part of the strategy is skipping the ones that you don't know how to do. Skip them first. All right, we're going to talk about how to attack a story problem. Story problems give a lot of people a hard time. So if you're one of those people who really roll your eyes when you see or hear the word story problem with math, don't feel too badly. But if you attack them with a good strategy, you have a pretty good chance. So also, at the very bottom, it says study guide page 51. If you want to turn to page 51 right now in your study guide, you can keep looking at this, or you can even fold that ear over on your page so you can come back to that later on. The first thing you want to do with a story problem is to read the story problem and look first for the question. Underline that question quickly, and then go back once you know what the question is and read the whole problem. So you've got question in mind and you really know what you're looking for. Read from the beginning to the end. Then you want to pull out the math of the problem. What are you going to have to work with? What numbers? Then reread the whole problem again. You can go a little more quickly this time, but do reread it and make sure you have the information that you need to answer the question. And then do the math. And then finally, check the answer that you have and make sure that the answer you came up with answers the question. All right, go to your math workout booklet right now and find workout A and workout B, even workout C. Okay, see the bottom window, it says examples. So right now, if you want to, go to that math workout booklet and you can circle or highlight or something, put a check mark by number 1 and number 8. Those are some really good story problem examples. And then B14 is a story problem, and C1 is another place to go look at for working out story problems so that you can really get your practice in. All right, this story problem is going to show you how to plug in possible answers and work your way through it as quickly as you can. So remember that first you're going to skim through and you're going to find that question. We're not going to read it that closely until we know what the question is. Underline the question. How many cars did he sell in January? That's what we're looking for. And then we go back and we reread. A salesman sold 40 cars in the first 3 months of the year. In January, he sold 4 fewer than he sold in February and half as many as he sold in March. How many cars did he sell in January? So if you don't quite know how to set this up and do it, you can start plugging in some problems. So let's take a look at that. So first, the first thing you want to do is notice that in the math section, the answers are going to go in order of smallest to largest or largest to smallest. So you don't want to start working your way through and plugging in starting with the smallest number, right? That might take too long. You can save yourself some steps by going right to the middle and starting with that middle number and see if that one is too large, too small, or maybe even the right one. Okay, so January, does January equal 13? Or what about February? So if we say, we know now, because we pulled out the math, that in February he sold 4 cars. So if he sold 13 in January and 4 in February, that is 17 cars total. So how many did he sell in March? Half as many. So we know that half as many in March means that he's going to have 13, and then that's times 2. So a total of 26 here just by plugging in. So is your answer going to be 56? No, because we know that he sold 40 cars total, so 13 is too big. All right, that tells you that you can also cross off A and B. And now you need to decide, is it going to be D or E? So a little tip here is that if 13 is too big, but it's not really that big, so maybe there's a possibility. If this were me, I'd be guessing on D. That's where I'd start next because it's not that big of a difference, and so E is probably going to be just a little bit too small. You do have to do some guessing here, but plugging in can really help. And remember that zap where you have to if you really don't know how to do the problem. All right, we're going to look at a little more difficult problem here. And remember that if it is a tough problem, the ACT throws at least one answer in there that is clearly wrong. We like to call that the Homer Simpson choice. Watch out for those. They're usually pretty easy to spot. So remember that we are looking at this problem. The first thing we want to do is find the question. What is the area of the quadrilateral? Now, some of you might already know how to do this, and you might be working this problem right now as you're watching. So if that's the case, just bear with me and pretend like you don't know how to do it, because we'll pick our way through, and I'll show you how you can work this. And also remember that this is not a first pass strategy problem. You're going to, because it's one that you have to look at. So it's a 2 for some of you and maybe a 3 for others. Okay, what's the area? Well, it gives you some information. So it tells you already that the square has sides that the length equals 4. So right away you need to find the area of the whole square, which is going to be 16. Okay, so it's not asking you the area of the square, and so right away we can eliminate E as a possible answer choice because that's the area of the whole thing, not the quadrilateral. And then we might want to come in and see how about from ZV times ZU. And you can do your math there. Each of those is going to be 2 inches in length. So the area of this square, 2 times 2, and the shape we're trying to find is clearly larger than that. So we know that we can now get rid of B as a possible answer choice. And we can also then eliminate A as a possible answer choice. So now we know, without really even doing very much math at all, that the answer is going to be 8 or 12. So if you know how to work triangles, you can work this problem correctly. Find the area of the shaded triangle using half the base times the height, and then you subtract from the area of the entire square. And if you don't know how to work triangles, that's something you can go back and check on starting on page 51 of your study guide. Okay, so we have the area equals half of the base times the height. So it's 16 minus 8 equals 8, and C is your correct answer. So the answer is C. Now, if you need a quick review on that, go back and check starting at page 51. Your study guide has a lot of quick reviews on math skills. Okay, and here is another good practice for ACT math. It's important to remember that figures on the test are not necessarily to scale, and the directions tell you that, but it's important to remember. So it might look like it is, but not necessarily. You have to look through the whole thing and try to figure that out. You can't go by thinking that it is as it looks on the test. So here's how this can cause problems if you're assuming that the figure is drawn to scale. We'll walk your way through that and show you what I mean. So first of all, we need to find the question. What must its perimeter be in inches? You want to find the question, look what you're looking for, and underline that. Okay, so notice that our figure looks like a square, but does the question prompt say anything about a square? No, it doesn't. So it calls it a figure. So notice that, even though it looks like a square. First of all, what does it mean when it says that the figure is symmetric? Well, we'll need to work that problem, and that'll help you find out. To work this, you kind of need to know first how to find the perimeter. So how would you find the perimeter of this? All right, that's right. We know what the lengths are, so we're going to have to do the math there. Now, I'll show you how to do this the wrong way. The wrong way would be to assume that A is the answer. If we were just looking at considering that this was going to be a perfect square, and remember, it has not told us that it's going to be. To find the perimeter, all you have to do with this is just add up the four sides, right? 4 by 4, 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4, and you get 16. That is not the correct answer because we're knowing that our figure is not a square. So how that helps you is you can eliminate A right away because that's one of those easy answer choices that is a distractor there. So remember that the question says the word must here. What must its perimeter be? Watch out for that. That is a tricky question. All right, so 16 is one that we can cross out. We know that's probably not correct. And we don't really know what X is, so we got to keep working. All right, it could look something like this. So let's see if we can work with that one. If the perimeter is the sum of each sides, because remember it says that it's got to be symmetrically divided. And so your correct answer is going to be E. And remember, if you don't know how to work this problem, if it's something that you're going to have to work with, this is not a pass 1 question. And for some of you, it might not even be a 2. It might be a 3. So go ahead and remember that you would be coming back to this one to do the math. So finally, big point, never assume that the figure is drawn to scale. Often it's not drawn to scale, so that the answer is not going to be too obvious. And you might have to redraw the figures using your scratch paper. And check the math section on some skills, and you can find these problems there and see the directions on how to work them if you didn't know how. Okay, here is another geometry problem. Keep in mind when you're taking the ACT that they sometimes use overlapping geometric figures, and that can kind of be confusing if you don't know what you're looking for. So in this problem, we want to find our question first and underline that. So the question, what is the area of the circle? All right, and we have a square here, but that's not what we're looking for. So maybe even double underline the word circle. That's what we're actually looking for, but some of that information about the square can help you out. So we know that we have an area of 100, but we're looking for the area in the square, but we want the area of the circle. So we're going to borrow that information. Okay, area of is going to be pi r squared. That's the area of the circle. That's your formula. So we need to find out, now that we know that the area of the square is 100, so we can do a little bit of math there. And we know that a squared plus b squared equals c squared. That's going to be your diameter, but we're not looking for diameter exactly. We need to know that our radius is diameter divided by 2. Then we come back to our area, which is pi times r squared. Okay, so if you need to brush up on these, by all means, go ahead and look at this problem and check out starting at page 51 and get those basic formulas down. They're going to expect you to remember those kind of basics. So we'll talk a little bit here about calculators. Calculators are acceptable, even though you don't really need one, but you can use one if you want to. Your acceptable calculators are your basic 4-function calculators, a scientific calculator, or a graphic calculator. Basically, probably the calculators you've been using in your math class, and your teacher lets you use that calculator on your math tests. Things that are not acceptable are handheld calculators, so you're going to have something that can stay flat on the desk. You can't have a tablet or a laptop, and you can't use your calculator that's built into your cell phone. So make sure that you have checked the calculator that you plan on taking with you. Some test sites will have calculators there. You can't always plan on that though. So be sure if you plan to take a calculator with you, you have the correct one. And here's a quick slide that shows you some of the calculators that are prohibited by the ACT. Again, to find out, visit the ACT website, and you can find out about the calculators that are prohibited and the calculators that are allowed on the website. All right, our next piece of advice is definitely think before you reach for that calculator, because sometimes you can spend a lot of time on a calculator and you might be able to just work the problem quickly on your own. So we're looking here at looking for the question. So which of the following is equal to x? Remember that you want to underline that question, and you could write out all of the 11 missing factors in the series, and some students might try to do that, but it will take a lot of time. So a better way is to remember that go to the middle possibility. So try that first answer choice, and then you can start working through. If you use the answer choice of 4/5, 5/6, and so we have kind of a pattern here. Do you see this? And then we're looking at multiplications here as well. So you start crossing these things out. And then we come up with 4/20. All right, and that's actually going to equal 1/5, and that's our correct answer. So we did that quickly without even using a calculator. And we'll take 20 minutes now. We're going to practice this 3-pass strategy as you work your way through 20 math questions in 20 minutes. And remember, do use the strategy. So go through all the problems quickly, do the ones you know how to do. Then go back and work on the ones that you probably know how to do, but it just takes a little bit of time. Save those questions that you don't know how to do for your 3rd pass. And zap where you can, guess where you can't, okay? So we'll take 20 minutes. Be sure to time yourself carefully on your phone, and we will check back with the answers when you are finished. And welcome back from your first math workout. And here are the answers to workout A. You can also find the answers and the answer explanations on page 1, starting on page 108 of that study guide. So as before, I'm going to go ahead and read these answers to you. Go ahead and check your work as we go. Number 1 is C, 2 is J, 3 is D, 4 is G, 5E, 6K, 7B, 8J, 9B, 10F, 11C, 12H, 13A, 14H, 15D, 16F, 17A, 18K, 19E, 20G. So just as we did with the English test, go ahead and add up the number that you got correct and put that on page 7 of your math workout book. Go to page 7, and then you'll find again the number you got correct and your anticipated math ACT score if you were taking that test today. Then go to page 85 in your study guide and put that score down next to the English scores from our previous video. Okay, so you check it out on page 7 of the math practice book, and then go to page 85 of the study guide and record your score there. All right, let's talk a little bit about possible error types when you're taking the math test. So we use that 3-pass strategy, and there are also 3 error types. Error number 1, those are the errors that are just kind of, I can't believe I did that. Or maybe you misunderstood the question. Maybe it was a careless mistake. So what I'm going to ask you to do right now is go back to your math workout booklet. Look at workout A and look through those problems. Which ones are error number 1 for you? Things that, you should have known how to do it. It was a careless mistake. You can stop this video in a minute after I've gone over our basic instructions and work your way through this, but you can also get started right now. Error 2 types are the ones that maybe you knew how to do, but you really can't remember how to do. So those are some skills that you can go brush up using the study guide. And then finally, Error 3 problems are math problems that you really just don't know how to do. Maybe you've never even seen that before. You want to focus on the error 1 and error 2 types because you really don't have time to go teach yourself a lot of new math. So maybe if you are taking the test a lot later, but in this case, usually you don't have that kind of time. And remember, you don't have to get everyone right. So go look at your study guide on page 108, and that's where your math explanations are for each problem to figure out, did you know how to do it? Was it a careless mistake? Have you learned it, but you just need to brush up on those skills? Or is it something that you've really never seen before? It's different for everyone, so you'll have to make that decision on your own. Some quick remedies for these errors. If it was an error number 1, practice, and check your work. Careless mistakes are easy to make, and you know on the test it's a stressful situation. So practicing is going to be your very best action there. Error number 2 is review. Use that study guide. Go look at starting on page 52. There's some skills there that you can review. And then if it's error number 3, practice recognizing those problems, because those are the ones that are going to be your third pass for the test. You need to be able to recognize them. Don't spend a lot of time on them when you're taking the test. If you don't know how to do it, zap or guess and move on. When you're practicing for this math test, just like with the English test, first, don't really worry about your score. The first thing that you want to do is figure out your error types. So pay attention to the problems that you missed. Is it a number 1 for you, a number 2, or is that a number 3? And then use that study guide. Starting on page 52, that's where some math reviews are. Rework problems that you missed and see, is that something that you did know how to do and you just forgot? And then go ahead and study those basic math concepts. Before we go any further, we're going to do a quick check on things that you can expect on test day. Remember that you do need to have a photo ID, your student ID or driver's license will work. You will have an admission ticket, and that's the voucher that's been printed off, or something that whatever you got from the school that is your admission ticket. You should bring 4 number 2 pencils with you. There will probably be pencils there, but you want to come prepared. And if you have 4 of them and they're all sharpened up nicely and ready to go, then you're prepared. Okay, and plan on bringing a watch. There's no guarantee that you'll be able to see the clock, and if it's the online test, you'll have a timer on your laptop, but if you're not sure, go ahead and find that watch just so you're prepared. Remember, it has to be a watch that's one of those old-fashioned kind, cannot be a smartwatch, can't be a watch that has any kind of timers or alarms. Plan to arrive early, and you will take the English and the math test first, and then they'll have a break. You'll come back for your second period of testing, and you'll have reading and science there, and there will be a break. And then the third period will be that 40-minute writing test. All right, so moving on from math, we're going to talk about the reading test just a little bit. Okay, remember that you have 35 minutes, 40 questions, and you will have 4 reading selections. So, and 10 questions on each one of those. So there's some strategies here to help you with that as well. The big one is to be realistic. I was going to say really realistic, but be realistic about your individual reading speed, which again is going to vary from person to person. So a little bit of practice will help you out a lot. Just like the math test, you want to get as many correct as you can, but it's not important that you read all 4 of these selections because, and depending on your reading speed, if you have time to read all 4 and get all 10 of those, each questions, all 40 questions answered, great. But if you're kind of a slow reader, my advice would be to be strategic here and make some selections on your reading. So our strategy here is to think about the competitive scoring. So what if you attacked 3 out of those 4 passages, you read those very carefully, and you got 8 out of the 10 questions correct? That would give you a raw score of 24. And then maybe you're blind guessing on those last 10. And so on the average, then you would get 2 or maybe even 3 correct if you didn't even read it and you just guessed all the way through. Okay, that gives you still a raw score of 26 to 27, and that will convert to a 24 on the ACT. So that's not a bad score for your overall ACT reading score. So be really strategic, look at the passages and which ones do you think you would like to read and could you read quickly. So we'll practice that when we do our reading test. Our tips for reading are save that least appealing passage for last, because so look at the titles. Which one looks least appealing to you? You'll have 3 that are pretty informational, and then you'll have 1, the literature piece, is kind of like reading a story. Do you like to read stories, or would you rather read the informational pieces? When you do start reading, read the entire passage, then go to the questions. This is a little bit backwards from what maybe you've been told before. In class, we say, hey, look at those questions first so that you know what you're reading for. But in this case, that's not the best strategy because this is a timed test. You really don't have time to read the questions, then go read the passage, and then come back and read the questions again. So go ahead and read that passage and then answer the questions. Finish with each passage before you move on. So that means go ahead and either zap or guess and move on. Don't plan to return to any passage unless you're doing that cleanup at the very, very end. Make sure that you are done with each passage because you really don't have a lot of time on this reading test. So strategies are zap, guess, move on. Don't plan on returning to a passage. Get finished with each one individually. And then you can underline as you read. Look for some important things. Look for proper nouns. That would be names of people, names of places, and that's what your the who or the what your story is really going to be about. So those will be important and probably be part of some questions. Also look for some sequence words like last, first, earlier, and that's giving you the order of something, and those are probably going to help you with those questions too. And then think about maybe expression words like he feels or she thinks. Those are some cues, and those will be good things to know for questions while you're reading. Some other key words to watch out for as you're reading are those transition words. So reversal words and phrases, on the other hand, or however, or the word but. So those are kind of contrast words. They mean that it's going to backtrack. It told you one thing and now you're going to hear something else. Or look for the supporting words, which means they're going to add on to an idea. So words like additionally or since, those tell you that they're going to add on to the main idea. And then result words. So if you see a word like, well, because or consequently, those are important also because they're telling you that something resulted from this. The study guide for the reading starts on page 65, and you can find these transition keywords there too. So you've got something you can study and kind of brush up on those words and phrases before taking the test. When you're taking the test, think of the reading questions with some true-false clues when you are zapping. So think about specific words in the question like all, always, every. So that means all the time. Is that true or false? Then there are some vague words like sometimes, may, often. So look for those clues and see if you can answer them in terms of a true-false question when you are zapping on those questions. Specific words are almost always going to be false because some things aren't always all one way all the time. However, those vague words are often going to be true. And we'll explain that as we get a little further into the reading test. So let's look at these sample sentences here in terms of something being true or false, okay? Every piece of art is equally worthy of praise. Is this true? Probably not. Some pieces of art aren't that great, right? So we can't say every one. Art is an activity that supersedes most others. Well, it's very individual, so who knows? All innovative art is attractive to the general public. Okay, that's not true. It says all. So on B it said most, and then we can look at D. Art and society usually influence each other. Again, that could be a true statement because we have the word usually. And you can look for evidence. The correct answers are always going to have evidence in the statement. So a true statement may not be the correct answer unless it's supported in the passage. If the answer choice is not in the passage, zap it. And then finally, you can look for those politically incorrect answer choices or negative answer choices. Those are usually very, very zappable. Go ahead and zap those choices. All right, here's an example of watching out for that political correctness. So this question is, the author's attitude toward the British monarchy is one of, and pity is not a very nice choice. That's kind of negative, maybe a little politically incorrect, okay? And so is disgust. That's not very nice. So the ACT is not going to give you a reading sample that has something that shows that's really negative or politically incorrect. So we can get those two choices out of the way, and now we can look at the possibilities of B or D. Nostalgia means looking back on something with fondness, and reverence is also kind of an honoring or a fondness. Either one of those is politically correct and could be the right choice depending on the reading passage. Another thing to look out for with the reading test is paired passages. So if you have a paired passage, first read passage A and then answer all of the related questions for that passage. Remember, using your time strategically is really important here. For your second step, go ahead and read passage B and answer all of the questions related to passage B. And then third, answer the questions that are related to both passages. This way, you've answered those questions shortly after you've read that passage. You have a better chance of getting those questions correct. And then when you come down to step 3 and you're looking at the questions related to both passages, if they're not fresh in your memory, you can zap them or you can guess them. Okay, we're going to practice with some reading. So pick up your orange test booklet, and we're going to do 20 questions in 17 minutes. So be ready to time yourself. Remember, timing yourself is an important part of your practice. So please time yourself. You can stop the video, give yourself 17 minutes, answer your 20 questions, and then we'll come back and go over the rest of, go over the answers and talk about your answers. All right, so you're gonna make some choices here because in your workout book, workout A has 2 reading selections and workout B has 2 reading selections. You can choose any of those that you want. You have 4 choices, just answer 20 questions. Put your answers in the workout booklet. If you finish up early, go back and check your work. Remember our reading strategies that we've gone over, and so read first, then answer the questions, and then check your work when you get finished. So see you in 17 minutes. Okay, welcome back from your reading workout. Here's the answer key for both passages of workout A and both passages of workout B. I don't know which passages you selected, so I'm not going to read the answers off to you at this time, but the slide will stay up for a bit. And you can also find the answers starting on page 139 in your study guide. So you can stop the video and go look in your study guide if you need to as well. Once you have finished, then you find at the back of each of the workouts, how many did you get correct, and find your ACT score estimator. And then write your scores down on page 85 of your study guide. So we're keeping track of your practice as we go along. And we're getting to the science test. Remember, you also have 35 minutes for 40 questions here. Primarily, you're looking at data analysis and maybe some conflicting viewpoints. You'll also be reading some research summaries. Keep in mind here that you don't need a strong science background. They're going to provide you with the information that you need. However, you will need to understand data analysis, so data points and charts and graphs. Use your study guide to brush up on any of those skills. Again, with the science test, take control. Choose the order of passages when you're attacking your passages. Choose what you're going to read. Look at data analysis first. So look through the passage. Are there any charts or graphs? Look at those before you start reading. And then second, are there going to be conflicting viewpoints? And then third, read those research summaries. So you get to choose the order of the passages as you read them. Again, remember competitive scoring. Very different from how things are usually scored for us in school. So if you are able to answer some of those questions correct, let's say that out of 15 that you can get 14 and then you're just guessing on the last 25 questions, you still have a raw score of 20, 21. Okay, and that's a 20 on the ACT. Go take a look at this on page 84 of your study guide and see how many questions you need to get correct in order to get the score that you would like to receive on the ACT. So here are some quick tips for science. First of all, work all the charts and graphs first. Do the data analysis passages first because those are the ones that are going to provide the best information for you. And then spend only 60 to 90 seconds studying those charts and graphs in the passage. Don't linger over them too long. Remember, timing is really important here. Look for the main idea. Identify the horizontal and the vertical variables on graphs and charts. And then identify the minimums and the maximums. Okay, a good place for practice on this is in your science booklet, workout B, and look at page 9. Here is an example of reading a graph very carefully. Okay, so in this graph, it looks to us like we have some alarming change. We're looking at CO2 concentration between 1850 and 1990, and it looks like it's almost 3 times as high as they used to be, which that sounds really, really bad. However, you want to take note that they didn't go all the way down on the vertical line here. They cut it off so we don't see the very, very bottom. So you could actually argue this from a little different angle if you had all of the evidence. On this slide, we have the same situation, CO2 concentration, but it went all the way down to 0. And so when we're looking at it from that standpoint, the change is not as drastic. So maybe it's more of a mild change. Look closely at your graphs and look at all of the measurements. Look at your maximums and your minimums. All right, so here's another tip. There are generally only 2 types of questions for charts and graphs. You're going to have to do some data analysis, so you'll have data questions, identify the values, or compare the values. And then you'll also have questions that ask you to look for trends and relationships. These are both fairly easy types of questions, and that's why we suggest that you do those charts and graphs passages first. All right, so we will look at an example here from a data question, and this question is also on page 9, workout B in your science booklet. And we want to look at the question: in which of the following years was the annual mean temperature closest to the 1950 to 1980 mean? Okay, so mean means that it's kind of in the average there. So as you can see, when you look from, and if you have a paper pencil test, you can draw some lines here. Even if you're online, you can use your mouse to skim over this a little bit. From 1950 over here to 1980, you can see that in this time there weren't a lot of extremes. So some of the real extremes are things that you can just kind of throw out. Those are the outliers, and they're not really going to be helpful to us. We're looking at this mean, the graph tells us, is the line that draws right across here. Okay, so you might be thinking that our correct answer over here is D, but there's D, the one that's right on 1980s, way up here. So the one that's closest, we have to be kind of careful. On that 1980 line is actually a little bit past. So that is an answer that could kind of distract you. It's not the correct answer. We need to look at the line graph that we would draw straight through here, and our correct answer is going to fall on C, 1920. So as you can see, you've got to watch those graphs carefully and look at your information, look at what's the question, and then look for the information that best fits the question and watch out for distractors. And here's another sample question that's looking at trends and relationships. So according to the graph, as the lake grows older, the rate of nutrient recycling, A, abruptly stops, B, remains unchanged, C, decreases slowly, or D, increases continuously. So again, this one is number 9 on workout A in your science booklet, page 4. So our question is, according to the graph, as the lake grows older. So we're looking for that trend and that relationship. Where are we going to find that information on the graph? Down here, we're looking at age on the lake. So as the lake grows older. And then we're looking for the rate of nutrient recycling. Where can you find that on the graph? Okay, so there's our rate of nutrient recycling. That's where you're going to find your information right there. So as we look at this graph, we see that D increases continuously. Okay, so you want to look at those graphs closely. All the information that you need is on the graph, and look out for distractors, because as you can see, there's a lot of information on this graph. We're only using one piece of it, so the rest of it is just a distraction. Look out for those, but it's also pretty easy to find, and so that's why you want to do those charts and graphs first. Okay, so tips and for the science test continued here. Work on conflicting viewpoints after charts and graphs, because those are usually easier to read than your research summaries. So the tips for conflicting viewpoints are very similar to reading tips. First of all, you want to read that passage and then answer the questions. Underline and circle important words and information in the passage. Look for the main idea of the passage. Identify both points of view, and then watch out for reversals. Okay, remember that these are conflicting, so go check out that list of reversal words that we learned about from the reading tips. So words like however, or but, or in contrast, those are going to be important words in these passages that let you know that there's been a switch. And then work on the experimental summaries last. We say this because they actually tend to be the driest, but once you get there, look at the purpose. What was being tested? What was the researcher trying to prove? Then identify the researcher's method. And again, which variable is being tested? What equipment did they use? Watch out for these things as you're reading these summaries. And then finally, what were the results? What do the data show? And then here are some more tips. Answer data results questions if time is short. Watch your time. Examine the point of view of the person who conducted the experiment. It is not necessary to understand so super technical sciencey terms. And do not rely on information from experiences or experiments that you have performed in class. Rely on the information that is in the passage. And finally, look out for negative twists. Okay, so here are some examples. Questions like, which of these is least relevant, or which of these contradicts? Which of the experiments does not support, or which of these was not a critical factor? Some good examples are in workout B on page 10. Okay, pick up your science workout book if you haven't already. We're going to complete science workout A. You have 15 minutes, so get ready to stop this video and time yourself for 15 minutes and do the 18 questions that go with science workout A. Remember, if you finish early, go back and check and use any of the tips that we've gone over as you're doing this first practice. Okay, you can begin. And welcome back. This is the answer key to Science Workout A, and you can find the answers to Science Workout A starting on page 151 in the study guide, along with the explanations. Okay, as usual, I'll read the answers to you. Quickly check your work as you go through your Science Workout booklet. Number 1 should be C. Number 2 is F, 3B, 4H, 5D, 6H, 7D, 8G, 9D, 10J, 11C, 12H, 13B, 14H, 15B, 16F, 17A, 18G. Okay, page 6 of your science workout book has the converter for the number that you got correct out of 18. That would be your raw score, and then your estimated ACT science score, which you can transfer over to page 85. And then you can look at the sum of all of those scores. We don't have your writing score on there, but this would be your estimated ACT composite score if you were taking the test today. And some final tips. Again, do a little practice. Don't worry about your score just yet. Practice working on one passage at a time. Remember to do the charts and graphs first, and then look at the conflicting viewpoints. It's a good idea generally to save those summaries for last because they're kind of the driest parts for reading. And use your study guide for to check your answers and look at those answer explanations. There's also some skills review starting on page 69 of the study guide, so that's another good place to look. And as we are wrapping up, you should be able to find a complete ACT practice test at this website below. It's the doorwaytocollege.com/online ACT practice test. Go check that out. There are other online opportunities to help you get ready for the test, as well as the materials that we've provided here. And Doorway to College Foundation provides a lot of materials to help students out. So there's some study skills materials. You are here with the test prep. There's also some college prep and some stuff for the student athlete. So check out Doorway to College and see about the other products that are available. And thank you very much for taking your time to get through these videos. At the bottom, you can see the promo code Doorway to College. If you do check out any of their products, you can use those for a 10% discount. And finally, as we're wrapping up, remember the #1 tip for taking the ACT is do not leave any blanks. If you leave blanks, you're throwing away points, and you want to rack up all the points you can get and get the best score you can get on the ACT. So don't leave anything blank. Answer the ones you know. Zap on the ones that you're not too sure about. And if you have no idea, just guess. But don't leave anything blank. Okay, this brings us to the end of our seminar. and I want to wish you the very best as you go take the ACT. I've appreciated this opportunity to bring this information to you. I think it's very, very important and it's very useful. I think these strategies will really help you, and I hope that you're able to see that when you get that score back on the ACT and you've put forth your best effort. You've done your very, very best. So good luck to you, and we'll see you around. This is Mrs. Kusky signing off. Goodbye.